Welcome back to Season 2 of Reddit's Dark Side, where I cover dark stories from, you guessed it, Reddit. To view my Reddit account page, just type in 10xbull. And to view the subreddit page, search up Reddit's Dark Side Real, where you could submit stories. And if you want to submit a story, you can also email at redditsdarkside@gmail.com. And if you want to be on the show, just include that in the email. Find Reddit's Dark Side wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. Now let's get into the story. Kidnapper who came in through the window. Posted by Persp Home Bean. I've done quite well for myself as an adult, but when I was younger, we were very poor. In middle school, I lived in government housing projects that were like little one-level apartments, with 2 apartments sharing a wall each, all spaced apart. There were woods directly behind the cluster of apartments, with no gate in between, but no one ever went into the woods, which I learned the reason for due to this incident. These apartments were very poorly made, and the windows could easily be popped in and out, never mind a lock. The front door was somewhat sturdy, but with a good kick, it would have easily been opened. My dad was a pretty stocky bodybuilder type, so I had a false sense of security, and would leave my windows and blinds open at night, as my room faced some trees, and that would blow in the wind. I love nature, and wasn't afraid of the dark, so I liked watching the trees as I fell asleep. Our apartment front door was facing the woods, as was my friend's behind ours, with our buildings blocking their view. As you walk into the front door, the hallway is on the left. My room was at the end of the hallway on the right. My big window that took up most of the wall was on the left, and my bed was sideways, facing both walls, so I could lay on my side and watch the trees. The woods were about a field away, facing our front door, so I couldn't see it from my room. This was just a small area of trees and vegetation. One night, I woke up feeling a sense of unease, and through my sleepy haze made out the figure of a large man standing at my window, watching me sleep with total confidence, not caring at all if he was seen. He was in a big coat and looked quite burly and average to a taller height. It was black in my room and outside, just barely illuminated by the moonlight. I had just cracked open my eyes and froze once I realized what I was seeing. I kept my eyes as closed as possible, just enough to peer at him in the darkness, and literally rolled out of bed to the side, not facing the window, and shouted for my dad, who was across the hall with both of our doors open as I crawled out. Not the smartest, but I was a dumb 12-year-old. He hadn't gone to sleep yet and was in my room in a heartbeat as the guy took off. He went to run out the front door yelling threats as well, which probably wasn't smart, but the guy was gone. I truly believe he never came in before or after this, just due to my dad's sheer size and build, but I'll never know. A few nights later, I was spending the night at my friend's, who lived directly behind us with the same layout. Her room was the first room on the left, with her window facing the woods, our apartment, blocking the view. Her sister's was the second on the left, and her mom and toddler sister were in the room on the right, like mine, in my own apartment. We finished watching Dave Chappelle and went to do one another's hair in her room, with her older sister helping us, while her mom and little sister went to bed. Not long after, we heard screaming from her mom's room and heavy stomping feet. Her older sister swung open the door to the room, and we were in there. There's just a flash of huge white man in his 30s, 40s, running down the hall towards the living room and front door, and her mom behind him with a butcher knife, hacking at the air and screaming bloody murder. Dude flew out of the door and towards the woods while her mom locked her door and called the cops. This man had the audacity to pop open the window and crawl into the bed that was pushed against the window, just slightly under it, not realizing this woman was a whole Amazon warrior who slept with a butcher knife and would clearly wake up to protect her baby. She was quick and had slashed him, though I'm not sure if the damage, since I was ushered home directly after. The cops went looking in the woods for him and found him and another man quite similar to him, living and hiding out there together. They were also responding to a call from a frantic mother whose little girl had been taken that day as well from our housing units, and they found her with these creeps. She had been there all day and night with them. It was around 3 to 4. They were taken to jail, and that's the last I heard of it, as the adults didn't let us into the adult conversation. Poor little girl was probably traumatized, and I hope she's been able to heal. I can imagine what could have happened if my mom's friend hadn't been so quick and slept with a weapon, or if he had decided to fight instead of run. I still don't understand why he didn't try to overpower her, but it's possible she injured him. After this, my dad explained to me how sometimes drug addicts or homeless people would hang out in these woods. So to the creepy dude who liked to peep and kidnap, let's not ever meet again. I buried my mom's dog. I got this weird message from my mom about 3 days ago. She deleted it shortly after, but I could still read it in the push notification I got. I'll summarize. There is something seriously wrong with your dad. When I talk to him now, all he does is stare at me. It's like this person isn't even him. He does all the things your dad would normally do, but there's just something off about him. Come over, please? I'm really freaked out. I was concerned for my dad, so I messaged her back. Take him to the ER, I said. It had only been a few hours, but she didn't respond. He's been dealing with some serious mental health issues, but he refuses to go see someone. Needless to say, I went over that night, after sending her a hasty text alerting her that I would be swinging by. My sister opened the door when I got there. She never opens the door, and there was something strange about her face. She looked depressed, like extremely depressed. Those kind of issues run in my family, but I had never seen her like that. She stepped aside as I walked in without saying anything. My mother was sitting on the couch playing Skyrim. She looked at me for a moment and then went back to what she was doing. I looked at my sister, who had to have seen the confusion on my face. She just nodded and sighed loudly. Kara, I said to my sister. What the hell? Something was seriously wrong. The hairs all over my body were standing up. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. They've been like this since the day I got home from work, she said. Her voice was weirdly monotone. What the fuck was going on? Mom? I called. Her gaze shifted over to me in the same uncaring way she had looked before, and then her eyes slid back to the screen once more. Kara sighed slowly. She looked so weird, and I couldn't put my finger on what was wrong. To be fair, I hadn't seen them in a very long time, since my dad has been very anal about quarantining. I gave Kara a look again, and she just shrugged. I moved towards my dad's office. He was the reason I came here after all, but a sinking feeling dragged me down the closer I got. I just knew that what I would see in there wouldn't be right. I could hear a soft scratching behind the door, and something suddenly dawned on me. The dog. My mom had a very friendly dog that was practically attached to her, and it was strange. She wasn't jumping on me. My veins ran cold. I couldn't open the door. Dad? I was practically whimpering, but I knew, under normal circumstances, that he would have heard me. The only response I got was loud scratching. That's new, Kara said behind me, and I practically jumped out of my own skin. Her eyes were glossy. Despite my terror at what was happening to her, I played it off. Jesus, Kara, are you trying to make me piss my pants? I yelled. She just looked at me, deadpan, and sighed. I'm scared to go in there for some reason, she said. For the first time all night, there was a hint of emotion in her voice. It was shaky. The frown on her was deep and scared. She was hardly scared of anything. She was the younger sister, but she was always the one protecting me. I didn't know what to do. Something evil was behind the door. I could just feel it rolling across the carpet from within. Kara was breathing hard next to me. Maybe we should just not, she squeaked. I looked at her again and saw genuine fear. I didn't know what was happening to her, but I knew that it was my turn to be the big sister for once. I put one hand on her shoulder. Go pack some stuff and wait in the car. You're coming home with me. She looked relieved at the words, and then she hugged me. She felt stiff and cold. I shivered. As she walked off to her room, I looked at my dad's office door once again. The scratching quieted down. He had been working from home, barely saw the family, and they were planning on moving. I stepped forward as cold sweats dribbled down my stomach. My hand touched the knob. Dad? I called once more. Nothing. The noise Kara was making behind me gave me a modicum of courage. Anything was better than the silence coming from within. I turned the knob and pushed. Something was in the way. I frowned. Dad? Are you okay in there? Then a disgusting smell hit me in every sense. I gagged slightly and groaned. What the hell was that? I had to get in there. A low whine came from within, and my blood ran cold. I pushed myself into the tight opening afforded to me. It was dark within a save small desk lamp illuminating my dad's desk. Are you alright? I asked. I could see his dark silhouette in front of the lamp, but he wasn't moving. I stared. Was he breathing? And then I reached over and flicked on the light. I screamed. In every corner of the room, there was what looked like bile, piles of trash, and feces lined the floor. My dad, he was sitting in his office chair, sunken. His breath came so slow, it barely registered. And his face resembled a skull. The sweat came faster now. The smell. God, the smell. I gagged. His eyes shifted, just as my mother's had, and landed on me. He didn't speak. I stepped backward and covered my mouth. "Dad?" I choked out. "I'm gonna call someone." He blinked, slowly. I didn't process what I was seeing. How he had gone this depressed? Why hadn't my mom called someone? Then something touched my bare leg. All the hairs on my skin stood, and I squealed. I looked down to see my mom's dog. Nothing but skin and bone. She could barely move or breathe. Audibly, I whispered, "What the fuck?" Her name was Spacey, my mom's choice, since the dog was kind of an airhead. She whimpered at me. What the fuck was I supposed to do? She was covered in filth. I was scared to even move her. I also knew that if I gave her water or food, she would surely die. She crawled towards me, slightly, and at a small barking noise. She could barely lift her head. After I called 911, I re-entered the room with a bottle of water and a blanket. It was too late for Spacey, though. It seems what small effort she put into getting my attention was the last she had. I wrapped her in the blanket after giving my dad a few splashes of water and took her into the backyard. Police and an ambulance arrived, to my sister sitting in my car waiting, my mom still playing her game, my dad dead, and me digging a hole for the dog in the backyard. I was sobbing, inconsolable. Before questioning me, the officer had a kind enough heart to help me put Spacey to rest. I don't know how to live anymore. My sister is here with me now, and she's not doing so well. It takes everything for me to get her to eat or take a shower. She barely gets out of bed. My mom is in the hospital. I haven't seen her in a week, but I am grateful she's alive. As for me, well, I can feel something creeping into me, like a sickness I can't heal. My sister won't get out of bed. But haven't I been calling out of work? I think whatever happened to my dad is happening to all of us. I feel sluggish and sad. Does anything matter? Did anything ever matter? I don't have the energy to move. I don't have any will at all. Check on your loved ones. Posted by May Ream. Things Keep Happening. Posted by The Jewish Viking, 1064. I posted not too long ago about moving out of my nightmare apartment. We had a house built on the opposite side of town, on land that was nothing but old farmland. I thought I had done everything right, even had a rabbi come and bless the house. It has been about 6 months since we moved in, but it seems like everywhere we go, something keeps happening. I will highlight the few of the ones that really stick out. This one? I'm really not sure what it even is, but I have seen it 3 times now. It started one night. I first saw this gold light fill the hallway outside of my bedroom. I tried to write it off as a trick of the eye, or maybe a passing car. A few weeks later, I was sitting in the living room, and all of a sudden, then, bright, golden, almost sparkler-like ball of pure golden light flying. It was flying around my daughter's room, and then disappeared down the hallway. The last time I saw it was the exact same appearance, still flying around my daughter's room, but this time being followed or chased by a pitch black ball. It looked like it was trying to flee from whatever was chasing it, so I kept this to myself because I didn't want to startle my wife since it's a new house. But one day, she was telling me about how one morning she was taking the kids to school. In front of the car was a ball of light that looked the same as I described floating down the road. The next strange occurrence only happened once, but still startled me. I had some weird feeling one night and woke up to see a girl with long dark hair in a white looking nightgown standing next to my bed staring at my wife. I moved toward my wife and I blinked. It was gone. I am a very light sleeper and any noise in my house will wake me up. On this particular night, I was awoken by what I thought was my daughter screaming. I thought maybe she was having a nightmare. So I got up from my bed, only to see something that still bothers me to this day. Standing in my laundry room was a man in a gray suit. The top of his head was above the doorpost, and he had the most disturbing grin. It was almost a comical looking smile that went up his face. As soon as I saw him, he began to dissipate, almost as if he was in water, fading away. As he was fading away, I had an intrusive thought enter my head. This idea or thought entered my mind telling me I was not meant to see him. It wasn't for me. Even now, I feel as if someone is watching us, just lurking in the shadows. The next morning, I told my wife about what happened. To my surprise, she responded finally, "You saw him too." She begins to tell me how she keeps seeing the same grinning man. She tells me that she has seen him in the neighbor's yard, along the tree line. just standing there watching. When she checked the side mirror to double check what she saw, the mirror was blacked out, almost like a void. It's happened about 6 times now in different places. She also gets these intrusive thoughts, but each time they're the same. I was waiting for you. I'm watching. The more I try to think on it, and I try to remember the details of it, I get a migraine. There are other small things that happen, but not really noteworthy. Every so often, I'll see what looks like a shadow peeking around the corner or move quick around the room. I just wish I knew why these things keep happening. Something unexplainable happened to me in the woods. I'm still shaking right now, and I don't know if I can make this cohesive, but I'll do my best because I need help figuring out what just happened. Maybe someone can come up with a plausible explanation that'll help me not be terrified. There's a nature park with hiking trails about 10 minutes from my house. I live in a fairly suburban area, so it's difficult to find places to walk without encountering other people or dogs. Plus, it's nice to walk through trees and see deer rather than looking at row after row of houses and fences. My dog and I walk there fairly often. I know most of the trails by heart, even though my sense of direction is terrible. After breakfast this morning, I decided to load up my dog and head up there. We like to walk when there's no one else there, so it feels like we're actually deep in nature. And I figured the morning of Christmas Eve would be the time everyone was visiting family and cooking or otherwise occupied indoors. I was right. There were no other cars in the parking lot when I got there, not even any employees. The museum section of the park was closed for Christmas, while the trails stayed open. Like most places, this has been a much hotter than usual December, so it was warm and breezy, basically perfect walking weather. I don't get cell service or internet on the trail, so it wasn't like calls or emails would be coming in to bother me until after I was done. My dog and I set out down the trail that feels the most woodsy and where we had the best chance of seeing wildlife, more exciting than squirrels. The first mile or so was totally normal. We saw squirrels and heard birds, and my dog sniffed all the poos she could find. We had some rain a few days ago, so some sections of the trail were just puddles of mud that I had to pick through, but nothing unusual. It was relaxing and a great way to start off the holiday. I don't know how to explain what changed, but I started to feel just generally unsettled. Everything startled me, and I was constantly looking behind me, convinced I would see something there. Praying I wouldn't. It felt like we weren't alone. I should mention, this isn't exactly strange for me. I love horror movies and stories, and of course, there's plenty that start with a character alone in the woods. I tried to convince myself it was just last night's no sleep visit coming back to bite me now that I was by myself. Anyway, I rely on my dog to be a paranormal activity detector. They always say animals are more sensitive than humans, so I count on her to let me know if something's up. She was still going about her business, sniffing and whatnot, so I tried to shrug it off. The farther we went, the more I heard things crunching just off the trail, like someone was walking next to me in the woods. I didn't see anything, and again, my dog was oblivious. I told myself it was just a deer or squirrels jumping around, more active than usual because no one else had been walking. My presence was probably scaring them out of their hiding places. It was around the start of the 3rd mile that I started to feel extremely cold for no apparent reason. I'm typically always hot, and it was a toasty 70 degrees with what felt like 1,000,000% humidity this morning. It was cloudy, and it's always cooler in the woods, but not like this. I was sweating, and my skin felt hot, but it was like I was freezing from the inside out, like someone had super chilled my bones. I decided I was probably getting sick and should pick up the pace so I can get home and take my temperature. Now, this trail is a 4-mile loop that spits you back out in the parking lot at its end. By that point, I was a little over halfway done, so I decided to finish the trail instead of turning around. I felt an insane pressure starting to build in my ears, like when they're about to pop, only they never did. My throat began to burn and ache. Each time I swallowed was like trying to swallow a branch. My stomach started cramping too. I decided I was definitely sick with the flu or COVID or something and picked up the pace, figuring I may have some diarrhea in the future and not wanting to get caught in the middle of the woods with no culturally acceptable toilet nearby. We'd probably made it another quarter mile or so when we came to a fork where there definitely should not have been one. The main trail has several branches that split off of it, but that was at the very beginning. I've walked this trail a dozen times, and I can guarantee you that there should not have been a fork right there. I stopped for a few seconds and just stared at it, confused. I mentioned my terrible sense of direction, so I tried to explain to myself that maybe I got turned around at some point without realizing it because I was feeling so ill. Still, this park has a map and a bench at every fork so people don't get lost. And I didn't see either of those, which only made me more uneasy and also made me realize I had no clue which way to go. When my dog started to pull towards the right branch, I decided to trust her intuition and go with it. I can't say exactly what it was that made me stop, but suddenly everything in me was screaming to turn around. My instincts about direction are almost always wrong, so I usually go the opposite way my gut tells me, but this was totally different. I had the niggling feeling that if I kept walking, I'd be going straight into danger, no matter what my clueless dog seemed to think. There was also a headache building in my skull, as though someone had injected air directly into my brain, and it was pressing on my temples, begging to be let out. I stopped and closed my eyes for a second, trying to collect my thoughts and get my bearings. When I opened my eyes, I noticed a deer in the middle of the path, maybe 20 feet away. It was staring directly at me, completely unmoving and not blinking. It had a single antler, spaced exactly between its ears, and it was sitting like a dog, with its back legs tucked underneath its body. Otherwise, it looked normal. Deer coloring, deer body, deer eyes. But that only made the differences all more unnerving. I stared at it blankly for a few seconds before dimly remembering I had my phone and should take a picture. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app, but it wouldn't load, just like a black screen, like someone had covered the lens. Frustrated, I closed the app and lowered my phone to see if the deer was still there, or if it had run away due to my movement. I wish it had, but when I moved my phone, I saw that the deer had roughly halved the distance between us, even though I hadn't heard anything. It was standing, too, but it looked wrong, like it was putting too much weight in its front legs. The front legs were slightly bent, like it was about to charge at me. That was it. The picture wasn't worth it. I turned and started sprinting the other way. I had only taken a few steps before my arm yanked back. My dog hadn't moved. She was straining against her harness, trying to go back down the path. The deer was even closer than it had been, though it was again sitting. I yanked my dog's leash harder than I ever had before, and she reluctantly came back to me, and I ran, despite the pain in my stomach, my lungs, my head, and everything. I ran. I'm not the most in shape person, but I ran for what felt like miles, back the way we'd come, away from the fork that shouldn't have been there, and whatever the hell was wrong with that deer. I could hear my dog panting and gasping, and she kept dropping behind me, but it didn't let us slow down, even when my legs were burning and I felt like I was going to pass out. We ran all the way to the parking lot, jumped in the car, and raced home. I don't have an explanation for what happened. Even weirder, I feel fine now. I don't have a fever, my throat feels normal, and my headache's gone. My stomach is still upset, and my legs are incredibly sore, but that's probably because I'm not used to running like that, or running at all. My dog is exhausted, but overall seems none the worse for wear. One other thing, I had set up my Fitbit to track the walk before we went in, since I like to know how far we've gone. It should have been just over 4 miles, since that's the length of the loop, plus a little extra for the detour we made. But according to my Fitbit, we only went 2 miles. The weirder part is, it says we walked 2 miles in an hour and a half. I'm not the world's fastest walker, but I definitely walk faster than that. And I spent the last half running as fast as I could. I know for a fact we went further than 2 miles in the time period, but apparently part of the walk is just gone. In any case, I think I'll take a friend next time I walk. Posted by miserable_seaweed290.